Iran and Israel despise each other. But one country terrifies them both. It spends $800 billion a year on defense, operates over 1,000 military bases, and with a single decision, slashed Iran's oil exports by 60%. The United States doesn't watch this conflict. It sits above it. And to understand why two enemies fear the same flag, you need to see how deep that power runs. Rear Admiral al-Rashid once said, "In this region, rules are not set by the loudest voice, but by the one with the longest reach." The United States spends about $800 billion every year on defense, a sum that eclipses the combined military budgets of China, Russia, Iran, and Israel several times over. That financial muscle supports a global network of more than 1,000 overseas sites, airfields, naval hubs, radar stations, and logistics depots. Some are sprawling bases with runways long enough for bombers. Others are little more than fortified outposts, but each one extends the US military's ability to project power far beyond its shores. No other country comes close. Russia and China each operate fewer than a dozen overseas bases. Iran and Israel have none. The United States also holds a permanent veto on the United Nations Security Council, giving Washington the final word on any international action against its interests. Every move by Iran or Israel is weighed against the reality that the US can move forces, enforce sanctions, or shut down trade routes almost at will. This isn't just about ships or soldiers. It's about setting the boundaries of what is possible for everyone else. Roughly 40,000 American troops are stationed across the Gulf, from Qatar's Al Udeid Air Base to the Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. This lattice of bases forms a ring around Iran, each site chosen for its ability to launch airstrikes or support rapid deployments at a moment's notice. Al Udeid alone houses more than 7,000 personnel, with runways long enough for bombers and tankers that can reach deep into Iranian territory. From Kuwait, F-16s and A-10s stand ready alongside a mobile Stryker brigade, while Al Dhafra in the UAE hosts stealth F-35s and MQ-9 Reaper drones. The 5th Fleet, anchored in Bahrain, keeps 2 to 3 carrier strike groups on rotation, each one bristling with Tomahawk missiles that can hit targets up to 1,600 kilometers away. When the USS Abraham Lincoln enters the Gulf, its flight deck becomes a floating airbase, projecting power over the entire region. Iranian planners track these movements closely, knowing that every major city, air defense site, and command bunker falls within the American strike envelope. Israel, too, is tethered to this network. About 80% of its F-35 fleet is funded by US military aid, and spare parts, munitions, and software updates all pass through American channels. For both Tehran and Tel Aviv, the real boundary isn't the border, it's the range of American carriers and the reach of US air power. As Admiral al-Rashid observed, the longest reach sets the rules, and in the Gulf, that reach is measured in thousands of kilometers. Iran's economy doesn't just feel the pressure of American power at the barrel of a gun. It's squeezed by the invisible grip of the dollar. Dr. Lala Karimi, a Tehran-based economist, calls it the world's most effective financial chokehold. When US-led sanctions tightened in 2018, Iran's crude oil exports collapsed from about 2.5 million barrels a day to less than 1 million. That single move erased billions in annual revenue almost overnight. With dollars drying up, Iran's currency plunged. By early 2023, the World Bank recorded consumer prices rising more than 50% year on year. Ordinary Iranians watched the cost of bread and medicine double, sometimes in a matter of weeks. But the pain doesn't end with lost oil sales. Nearly 85% of global oil deals are settled in dollars. When Washington orders banks to cut Iran off from SWIFT, the world's main financial messaging system, it's not just American firms that freeze out Tehran. European, Asian, and even regional banks comply, fearing US penalties. Dr. Karimi points out that every time the rial stumbles, it's not just sanctions at work, it's the leverage that comes from controlling the world's reserve currency. For Iran, the threat isn't just about ships in the Gulf or jets in the sky. It's the knowledge that Washington can turn economic pain on or off, almost at will. 21 million barrels of oil pass through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. That's nearly 1/5 of the world's total supply, and every barrel depends on safe passage through a corridor just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. The United States has turned this bottleneck into a guarded artery. Since the 1980s, American naval doctrine has treated the Gulf as a zone where even a minor disruption could ripple across global markets. Over 2,000 escort missions have been conducted by US warships, shepherding commercial tankers through waters shadowed by Iranian patrol boats and missile batteries. In 2019, the USS Kidd responded within minutes when an Iranian fast attack craft closed in on a convoy, firing warning shots that sent the vessel retreating. These aren't rare incidents, they're routine practice. The International Maritime Organization tracks over 20% of global oil exports, transiting this choke point, and for countries like Israel, the stakes are personal. Nearly 30% of Israeli oil imports rely on these Gulf routes. Rear Admiral al-Rashid described the United States as the gatekeepers of the world's energy faucet, a role that grants Washington enormous leverage. The power to keep the oil flowing, or to cut it off, gives the United States a silent veto over any escalation between Iran and Israel, and a potent diplomatic lever in every negotiation that follows. When Washington announced the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in July 2015, the mood in Tel Aviv was wary but measured. Iran agreed to curb its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief, and for 3 years, the threat of a regional war seemed to recede. But every word from the White House carried weight far beyond the negotiating table. Israeli defense planners, led by Colonel Amos Levi, tracked each shift in US policy as if it were a live missile alert. Levi argued that American statements could reset Israel's readiness posture overnight. He often pointed to 2018, when the Trump administration withdrew from the JCPOA. Within hours, Israel's Air Force moved to a higher alert, and missile defense crews ran unscheduled drills. Levi described the moment as a data link event, not just rhetoric, but a signal that could trigger real-world action. Israel's Iron Dome batteries, for example, depend on a constant stream of targeting data from US satellites and command centers. Any hint of a policy swing in Washington means technicians check the integrity of those links, knowing that a single disruption could leave cities exposed. On the Iranian side, the collapse of the deal revived hardline voices who saw every US statement as a countdown to confrontation. The United States holds a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, and with it, the power to reimpose global sanctions or authorize force. Levi contends that this diplomatic lever is as important as any missile or airstrike. The mechanics of war in the Gulf can pivot on a press release or a presidential tweet, and both Tehran and Tel Aviv know that the real trigger finger often sits in Washington. 2 American carrier strike groups now steam side by side in the Gulf, their decks crowded with fighters and surveillance drones. Each carrier is a city of steel, capable of launching dozens of sorties in a single hour. The USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald Ford together carry more firepower than most regional militaries. Their presence is not just symbolic. Every Iranian radar operator and Israeli defense planner knows that a single order from Washington can turn these ships into the tip of a global spear. The risk matrix stretches far beyond the Gulf. NATO's Article 5, the alliance's Mutual Defense Clause, binds 31 countries to respond if a member is attacked. American bases in Turkey, Italy, and Greece fall under this umbrella, creating a tripwire effect. Any strike that hits US or Allied forces could trigger a response not just from Washington, but from capitals across Europe and North America. The 2003 invasion of Iraq lingers in every calculation. Tehran's military doctrine, rewritten in the years since, treats any large-scale US deployment as a warning that regime change could be on the table. Israeli officials, too, watch for signals that the US might escalate from support to direct intervention. Three levels of risk now hang over the region. At the lowest tier, local clashes draw in US forces as peacekeepers or deterrents. At the next, a missile strike or drone attack on a carrier or base could ignite a regional war. At the highest tier, a direct hit on a NATO ally could invoke Article 5, pulling half the world into open conflict. Rear Admiral al-Rashid's words echo in the war rooms. The longest reach sets the rules, but it also holds the detonator. In this standoff, the margin for error has shrunk to the width of a runway or the arc of a missile's flight. American decisions still ripple through every calculation in Tehran and Jerusalem. As US warships patrol the Gulf and sanctions bite, the balance remains precarious. In a world on edge, one distant power still decides how far conflict can go and how quickly it could spiral out of control.